Hey everyone, I'm Jill and this is YesterKitchen. And before I get started, if you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button down below. And as always, I will have the entire recipe down in the description for you. And if you really like what you see, after you hit subscribe, hit that little bell and you'll be notified every time I release a new video, which hopefully is every week. I'm trying my darndest to do that for you. Today we're going to talk about the it girl of the food world. Yes, there is one, at least in my opinion. You know the it girl. One day you're in, one day you're out, one day you're invited to every party on the planet, and one day your phone just doesn't ring. Well, that's kind of like how our dish is. Except one decade she was in, one decade she was out, and she kind of flip-flopped until she landed on being a classic. So who am I talking about? I'm talking about the shrimp cocktail, and she is fabulous. So it all started way back in 1860. The legend is there was a miner in San Francisco, and he used to eat oysters with just plain ketchup. And some people think it's because he didn't like oysters. Well, why would you eat them? And some people think it's because the oysters were a little old. Again, why would you eat them? But he did. And for whatever reason, people saw him and kind of tried it themselves, and it just kind of a little bit caught on, and some other people were doing the same thing. But that was kind of it in the way we know oysters, cocktails, and shrimp cocktails today. But then, somewhere between 1894 and 1914 at the Palace Hotel, a chef created a dish called Oysters Kirkpatrick. And they were cooked oysters, but they were in a sauce of ketchup and chili sauce and Worcestershire and A1 steak sauce. So you kind of get where it's kind of developing into what we know today. Anyway, this dish became really popular, and people were just ordering it all the time. And other restaurants saw it and kind of and kind of developed their own style. And eventually we wound up into seafood cocktails. So everyone was really digging on seafood cocktails, especially into the 20s. That just became the thing. Except instead of shrimp, people were mostly eating oysters. It was just where they were right now, and shrimp really didn't come into fashion in a seafood cocktail yet. But they did have oyster cocktails, and they did have fruit cocktails, and they were just kind of the trend of the day. So, 20s also had Prohibition. So where did these stemmed glasses that we're so used to seeing shrimp cocktails being served in come from? Well, the restaurants and the bars had all this barware that they just couldn't put alcohol in. So somewhere along the line, a chef or a bartender or a restaurant owner, we don't know, but got the idea of putting shrimp cocktails in cocktail glasses. And it just was pretty and people liked it. And another thing that came out of the 20s was leaving the tails on the shrimp. And that was for the ladies. They decided they were very dainty ladies and they needed a little handle to hold the shrimp. So when they dipped it in, you can eat it and not mess up their fingers. So there was shrimp, but mainly it was oysters. And now I'm going to teach you a very classic shrimp cocktail sauce recipe. It's actually from 1978 during the heyday of the shrimp cocktail, but we'll get to that later. Right now I just really want to teach you how to do it. So the first thing we're going to use is a 3/4 cup of chili sauce. You know, the stuff in the market, in a little glass bottle. You could use ketchup, but it just won't give it that little special kick that we have. And next, we're going to put in 2 tablespoons of horseradish. Yes, I'm a human being and sometimes I need to look at my notes. And we just want to mix that up really, really well. And now it's starting to really look like it. Now let's talk about horseradish. I'm using the prepared version, and that's actually straight from the recipe. But if you really want to try something different, get yourself a real horseradish root and grate it really fine and use 2 tablespoons of that. It's kind of cool. To that, we're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of Worcestershire, and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And then we have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and about 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper, but this is all subjective. It doesn't have to be exact. And lastly, we have just a dash of cayenne, just for a little kick. I know Tabasco is also very popular, and you can feel free to use that too. But I kind of like this recipe out of 78, and it kind of works. So here's our first cocktail sauce. I've got one more for you that's going to kind of come out of the 70s as well. So this is our first cocktail sauce, straight out of 1970. 78. Wait, yep, 78. So we're gonna go back to the 20s really quick. So oyster cocktails were super popular and everyone was loving them. And you know, the roaring 20s, it was just fun and happiness and the awesome clothes that the women wore, and everyone just had money to burn. And then came the Depression. So people just didn't have the income, and well, our little shrimp cocktail kind of fell out of favor. People just couldn't afford her anymore. And then came the war. And so then there was food rationing, and well, we just didn't have time or money for a little shrimp cocktail. But then came the 50s. Our soldiers came home, everyone went back to work, the families were all together, and the expendable income started coming back in. And guess who else came in? Our little shrimp cocktail. She was so popular, she actually started making guest appearances on TV shows. She was in the fancy restaurant scenes on Ozzie and Harriet, and on I Love Lucy, and even on Leave It to Beaver. She even made an appearance at the Brady Bunch in the 70s, but that's for a little bit later. But she was back. Our little it girl was back, and she was just on every menu in every restaurant, and everybody was loving the shrimp cocktail. Oh, and yes, we did switch to shrimp because at the time the fad was like a Creole Cajun, and that culture brought the shrimp into the shrimp cocktail. So oysters kind of went away, and our shrimp cocktail was here. So now, in comes James Beard. You all know who James Beard is, right? He was the cook in the 70s, and his opinion was really important, and he really charged the way of all kinds of foods. And you've heard of the James Beard Awards. That's all from him. Anyway, he said that there was no popular first course as a shrimp cocktail. And he was right, and if James Beard said it, he was absolutely right. He wasn't a super big fan of our traditional cocktail sauce, though. He suggested either a mignonette, which is like pepper and vinegar and shallots, or Thousand Island dressing. Go back and watch my Thousand Island dressing video. I have an original recipe, and you'll find out how it all started. Now on to James Beard. We're gonna learn about a mayonnaise-based sauce. This one's a little more upscale. It's called Shrimp Cocktail Supreme Sauce, and it's actually from 1966. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add 1 cup of sour cream. Get it all in there. And we're gonna add a 1/2 cup of mayonnaise. And again, please use real mayonnaise, because that's what they did back then. We're gonna kind of mix it together. And then we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of fresh lemon juice. Always try to use fresh if you can. That bottle stuff just, it's not that great. Then we're gonna add 2 to 3 ounces of caviar. I'm using the red today. Ooh, I need a little spoon. I'm using the red, but it's either red or black. Caviar is not in your budget, not a problem. You can put about 6 anchovies in here as well, and you'll still get that, you want that salty kind of taste, and that's kind of what you're gonna get out of here. And then you wanna kind of let it sit for a few. But of course, I can't wait. So now we're in the 50s, and the 60s, and the 70s, and our shrimp cocktail is just loving life. She is invited to every home dinner party and every home cocktail party, and she's on every restaurant menu, and people are loving it. But as all good things come to an end, so did her reign. In the 80s, people were starting to say that shrimp cocktails were bland and boring and passé. So she kind of fell out of grace again. So see what I mean? She's in, she's out, she's in, she's out. Well, now she's out again. But by the 90s, she started to become relegated to a classic. Now the classic status, that's somewhere we all want to be. If you still go to the old steakhouses, you'll find her on the menu. Or the fish houses, you'll find her on the menu. And so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna actually take our little shrimp cocktail. Look how cute she is. Look at that. You always want to serve it on a little bed of lettuce. I shred mine. Some lemons, our little shrimp. So now we're going to take our 2 cocktail sauces. Get these out of the way. And you can either put the sauce right on top of the lettuce, but because I have 2 sauces, I'm going to go ahead and put them on the side. And we'll stick this one in here. So I'm thinking that because shrimp cocktail has been through so much up, so much down, so many stories, so many houses, so many parties, I think she's the one that deserves a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Just a thought. Can you see it? Shrimp cocktail. I think everybody would love that. Anyway, I think that's all for me today. So go ahead and try shrimp cocktail and just feel the time. Feel the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, or even go ahead and make them with oysters if you like and use the regular red sauce, and you can just live those 1920s. So from me to you, thank you for being here. And this is YesterKitchen. History never tasted so good.